when we're able to really map our own unique nervous system and see the places we go physically and emotionally and where our thoughts go, and then ultimately where our behaviors go, we can bring a lot more self-compassion to who we are and how we show up in the world.
Welcome to Talkin' Shit, the podcast where we get real about the unfiltered truths women face in the quest for perfection. I'm Jana, your host, a dietitian and fellow woman navigating the pressure to have it all together, the perfect body, career, relationships, and making it all look effortless. Who set that standard anyway? Here, we're calling out the diet fads, hustle culture, beauty standards, and everything else that keeps us feeling stuck. But we're not just venting, we're diving into how to break free and rewrite the rules on your terms. So grab a coffee or a glass of wine and let's talk some shit. Together, we'll uncover how to live a life that's unapologetically yours. This is Talkin' Shit. Let's dive in. Welcome everyone to the Talkin' Shit podcast. I have Kim back with me because you all responded so well to Kim's first episode on the nervous system. And Kim, like I shared before we started recording, you did a fantastic job of teaching us and becoming more aware for our own self. And I think there's so much power when we are able to identify what we need and then to be able to give ourselves that. So we're going to dive into a topic that's a little new to me and maybe to you as well. But Kim, thank you so much for giving of your time and your energy and your expertise again for today.
Oh, I'm so glad to be back, Jana. I had such a great time last time. I'm Kim Jackson Massaro. I'm a nervous system coach, and one aspect of my life. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker in another aspect of my life. But in both practices, my underlying theory that I use is called polyvagal theory, which is about the makeup of the nervous system and how our own unique nervous system impacts the way that we relate to the world, to our relationships, and to our body.
Ready to lose weight, feel in control around food, and build a lifestyle that actually lasts? The Healthy Body Collective is my monthly coaching community where you get expert guidance from me, Jana, live coaching, real accountability, and a supportive group of women who actually get it. You can click the link in the show notes to join now. See you inside. The way we relate to the world. I love how you say that. And we were talking a little bit about this idea of mapping your nervous system, which I'm so intrigued by. So what do you mean by mapping your nervous system?
So in polyvagal theory, Stephen Porges came up with a new definition of the nervous system. Traditionally speaking, the way I learned it when I was 17 in my very first psychology class, we had the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system. You had the fight or flight response and the rest and the repair response. Well, through his research and study of both autistic children and preemie infants and the development of the nervous system, Stephen Porges defined the rest and repair side, or what we call the parasympathetic side. He actually delineated it into two separate portions. He called it the ventral vagal system and the dorsal vagal system. So it's really sciencey speak for basically the front part of the development of your body and the back side of the development of your body in utero. So ventral is the front, dorsal is the back. But ventral vagal has to do with the social engagement system. It's the cranial nerves of the face and the ears, and they are what connect us to each other. So when I feel safe, when I feel connected, when I feel in an environment where it feels safe to be vulnerable, I'm generally in the ventral vagal system. And so when I'm sharing with a friend, when I'm laughing with someone, when I feel connected and safe in a relationship, I'm really in that ventral vagal state of the nervous system. The next layer is the sympathetic system, which we're all familiar with. That's the fight or flight system. It's what we have to mount in order to protect ourselves when our body senses a threat. And if we recall from our last talk, our nervous system, our brain is perceiving about 4 million bits of information at one time. And so there's something that can happen within our sympathetic nervous system that could trigger us at any moment, and we may not have conscious awareness of it. And so our body is very primed to be able to go into sympathetic response in order to protect us. But that sympathetic response, sometimes, depending on how our life is structured, how our culture is structured, it may be sent into a sympathetic response over and over and over again, so that our nervous system is sort of on the side of sympathetic response and has a hair trigger response to that.
Mm-hmm.
The other portion of the nervous system that Stephen Porges defined was called the dorsal vagal response. And the dorsal vagal response is really when our body tends to collapse and withdraw. It pulls back from things in order to protect us. So when our body mounts a sympathetic response, we are doing so in order to protect ourselves. We're either going to put up our dukes and we're going to fight with somebody, or we're going to hightail it out of there. But there are moments in time where we experience something, whether it's abuse or neglect, where our nervous system is not able to fight or flee. And so when it's tried over and over and over to fight or flee, and it can no longer do so, it often drops down into this helplessness or hopelessness, or this dorsal vagal collapse. And so when we map the nervous system, what we're doing is we're actually asking questions about our own unique response to the nervous system. So if I'm in a sympathetic energy, and this is what I'll do with my clients, I'll ask them, so are you familiar with what it feels like to be in sympathetic response, this fight or flight energy? And they'll say, yeah. And I'll say, think back to a time where you've experienced that. And I want you to let me know, like, what are you feeling in your body? What are coming up? What's coming up for you somatically? Do you feel tightness in your shoulders or heaviness? Do you feel like your stomach's tense and in knots? Do you feel pressure on your chest? And so we begin to identify the unique response that a person has related to their physical sensations. We'll also dive into things like their emotions. What are the emotions that are coming up for you when you're in a sympathetic response? I often share my own nervous system mapping with my clients, and I let them know when I feel under threat, the place that I go is generally rage. And that is when I started to feel that more frequently and I learned how to identify that, it was a huge eye opener for me, that the reason that I was going into this rage response that created so much guilt and so much shame was because I felt under threat. I felt like people were attacking me. And so my response was to do this, like physically, I'm going to throw my arms out and make people go away from me by doing like the Hulk response, like, and rip my shirt off and say, get away from me.
Yeah.
And so I think when we're able to really map our own unique nervous system and see the places we go physically and emotionally and where our thoughts go, and then ultimately where our behaviors go, we can bring a lot more self-compassion to who we are and how we show up in the world.
Oh my gosh, there's so much I love about this. So it's very interesting. So just to give context, so I think, if individuals have done the work or if they've done therapy, or maybe they're a little bit curious more on like the emotional intelligence side, they may be familiar with this. But for someone that is like, this sounds really intriguing to me, and I'm not really sure what that means. Like when you say fight or flight, what are some common fight or flight behaviors that we would normally see from an individual?
So I think it's really important. Like when we go into fight or flight, this is not something that we choose.
Mm.
Like this is a biological imperative. So this is part of our autonomic nervous system, which means that our body's going to automatically do it in order to protect us.
Mhm.
Now, so where people go when they are in fight or flight is going to be different for each individual person. And the reason for that is because of how we were raised, the type of family that we were raised in, the type of culture that we were raised in. So, for example, I was listening to a podcast last night with Brene Brown, who is, I think I talked about her last time too, but she just inspires me so much. But she was talking about the fact that in the family system that she grew up in, there were only two acceptable emotions. It was either pissed off or okay. And so if you grow up in a family system where you are only allowed to experience anger, then your fight or flight response may be rage or anger or being pissed off. If you grew up in a family system where anger was never allowed and you are not allowed to express anger towards anyone else in your family or even anyone outside of your family, the place that you go when your fight or flight response triggers may be to flee, maybe to go run away and to go, hide yourself in your room. I've definitely had clients who talk about how their response to their family system growing up was to go hide in the closet, was to go find a space where nobody could find them. And it was safer for them to protect themselves in that way by getting out of the space that they were in. So I really do believe that it depends on one, it's multi-layered, right? It's your personality.
Mhm.
So we are born with a temperament that we don't have a lot of control over. And I did not think that that was true until I had twins. And then I saw how their temperaments were so different from each other from the very get-go. But then we are also conditioned by the family system that we're born into. And even if there is no abuse, there are still certain ways that are acceptable to respond to particular behaviors. And in my generational cohort, we were not encouraged to feel our feelings. We were encouraged to stop crying, get over it. You're fine. Brush it off. And so there were a lot of emotions that were not tolerable to express in my family system. And so it can look different for every person. Now, biologically speaking, our body has a specific response that it will have. All the blood flows to our muscles to get ready to fight or flee. Our eyes open up wider. We don't have any spit anymore. We may even evacuate our bowels or feel like we have to when we're in a fight or flee response. And that is a standard biological response that we will have in fight or flight. When it comes to how that translates to behavior, it's going to be different for each person. So was it okay to fight or scream in your house? Was it okay to throw things? Was it okay to use language like calling people names? And these might be places that we go. Now, I'm not saying it's places that we like to go, but it might be places that we do go because that's how our nervous system feels like it's going to be able to protect us.
Mhm. And from my understanding, so correct me if I'm wrong, is it's also very situational based. So you could fight in one scenario and you could flee in another. So
Absolutely.
we all have the ability to do all of it, just
Yes.
depending on essentially the activation or the trigger or how our body is perceiving that very thing.
Yes. And for example, when I mapped my nervous system with the way it responds in sympathetic response when I feel under threat. If I'm with people who have less power than me, I will respond with rage. If I am with people who are bigger than me or more assertive than me or have more power than me, I will respond with flee.
And your body's picking up on that.
Mhm.
So you've already determined that maybe on it sounds like maybe subconsciously, or is that a conscious dynamic?
So this gets back to the concepts of what we talked a little bit about last time with EFT and
Mhm.
the lenses that we begin to look through life with, right?
Mhm.
And so I had many experiences in my childhood where people who were bigger than me, people who were more powerful than me, often were harmful or hurt me. And so my body learned, and my limbic system encoded inside my brain that, hey, people who are bigger than you are a threat. So anytime you're around someone who's bigger than you, don't try to fight your way out of it. Just get out.
Mhm.
Just get out. Or
Mhm.
don't even get close. That's kind of where my nervous system goes. Don't even get close to those people. So it makes a lot of sense that my husband's not that much bigger than me, right?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, yes.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay, so when you're mapping your nervous system, there's four different areas that you're really tuning into. Can you share those four areas?
Yes. So typically when I work with people, I've tried it before where we map the whole entire nervous system, ventral, sympathetic, and dorsal, and it's a little bit too much for one session. And so now we really focus in on one section. So we'll map the sympathetic nervous system. And generally, what I ask people to do is to recall a time in the past where they have been in sympathetic energy, connect with that feeling of what it feels like. And then first, I ask them to connect with how they feel it in their body. So if you're in sympathetic energy and that feels like fight energy, what does it feel like in your body when you feel ready to fight somebody, when you feel ready to defend yourself or stick up for yourself? And so people will identify for me where they feel in their body, what it feels like to be in sympathetic energy. And from there, we move on to what the emotions are. So I ask them to feel into that place in their body. Maybe it's their chest that feels tight, or it feels heavy, or it feels like they can't quite catch their breath. And I'll ask them, so if that part of your body could tell you what emotions they were feeling right now, what emotions would they be able to identify? And so we might then go through fear or anger or discouragement or frustration or intolerance or whatever it might be. So they begin to identify the different emotional states that they're feeling. And then we move on to thoughts. So, based on these feelings that you're having in your body and the emotions that these are bringing up, what are the thoughts that then follow from these responses that you're having in your body? And really, I kind of follow that. Even though there's four pieces, I usually follow sensations, emotions, thoughts, and then behaviors, because that's generally how we react inside of our bodies when something is happening and our body feels under threat. Usually it starts with a feeling in the body, then maybe we're able to identify the emotion, and then it goes to a thought, and then the thought usually will trigger a behavior. And so we go through that. And sometimes people are able to identify a thought. Sometimes it's a little bit harder. But generally, there will be a specific fear or a specific belief, sometimes a very specific belief that is very, very old belief that may be coming up, like, I'm not going to be able to get out of this, or why does this always happen to me, or this person doesn't love me. If they did, they wouldn't treat me this way, and that's why I have to fight. And then when we move on to behaviors, we are looking specifically at things like, how do I relate to sleep when I'm in a sympathetic response? How do I relate to food when I'm in a sympathetic response? How do I relate to my phone or the television or online shopping when I'm in a sympathetic response?
Yeah.
And then we might even think about how do I relate to others when I'm in a sympathetic response, whether I'm having a rage attack or not. Is it my tendency to pull people in when I'm in a sympathetic response, or is it my tendency to push people away? Or is it my tendency um, to flee from people? Just it doesn't even feel safe to be around people. And so I'm just going to go be a hermit somewhere. And so what this helps me do in my coaching with my clients is to really understand like these are the places that my body tends to go when I'm in a sympathetic response. And so what it does is it gives us a lot of information that we can use to then bring in some of those somatic techniques that we talk about in order to address the physical sensations in the body, in order to do a deep dive into that belief that you've just identified in your thoughts so that we can trace that belief back down to some of the origins of where that belief first began. Yeah.
It sounds like so much more understanding can be created versus more shame, guilt, criticism when you can truly like map your nervous system and understand the sensation to the emotion to the thought to the behavior. I mean,
Mhm.
that is such I mean, it's a linear pathway, but it probably doesn't feel linear when you're going through it, right? It probably feels maybe very chaotic. But then to give yourself that understanding to then, is the goal to shift the behavior or is it to understand the behavior?
So when I map the nervous system with my clients, my goal is really to bring insight into the process. And then what I usually like to describe, and of course I love to use my hands when I talk, but so I always tell my clients when we're able to identify our body sensation and our emotion, then we can identify the thought that goes along with it. Sometimes what we're able to do by understanding this is we're able to build a space between the thought and the behavior.
Mm.
And within that space that we've created by bringing in understanding, we can add some self-compassion in there
Mhm.
and help interrupt the process where we've been feeling guilty or ashamed or criticizing ourselves or having really negative inner critic voice.
Mhm.
We are able to introduce that space in between the feeling and the feeling and the thought before the behavior comes. And so by introducing that space of self-compassion, it gives us more time to think about and introduce a new behavior
Mhm.
before we reach out for old behaviors. And so by introducing that self-compassion, it gives you an opportunity to really bring in the opportunity to change. Now, no one says you have to change, but if you want to, now you have the space to be able to think about it or to be able to introduce a new behavior.
So this is really curious to me because a lot of when I start working in the compassion space with individuals, like compassion around the body and compassion around food, even there's a lot of pushback that I can't be compassionate towards myself because it will, like, I'll lose even more control. How can you use compassion, or why is it so powerful, I should say, to use compassion in this space, um, just in general?
I think I think compassion is the number one thing that we have to bring to ourselves when it comes to first identifying what's happening within us and to being able to bring any sort of change. People don't come to us as coaches unless there's something about their lives that they want to change.
Okay.
And so when you want to bring change to your life, you can't knock yourself over the head and be like, God damn it, change. Sorry, my language. God,
Full talking shit for a reason.
right. But like you can't continue to beat yourself over the head because if that worked, we would already be where we want to be, right? And and so compassion, I think, and I think I brought up Gabor Mate last time. Gabor Mate has a protocol he calls compassionate inquiry. And compassionate inquiry is really the idea of I'm going to look at the particular behavior that I'm struggling with, and I'm going to reflect on what is it about this behavior that is serving me in some way? Because I did not start this behavior. I did not start using this drug or this alcohol or this food or this gambling. I didn't start it because there wasn't a need to feel a certain way. So why did I need to feel a certain way to begin with? And if I needed to feel a certain way and this particular behavior gave me that feeling, why wouldn't my body want to continue doing it? Right?
Yeah, so much under why wouldn't it? So I like to say, that makes so much sense.
Hmm.
Like if it's seeking, for example, connection,
Hmm.
why wouldn't you keep doing that if you are needing like connection just as a human? That makes so much sense. And then we can give compassion to be able to say, and maybe how do we form that connection?
Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, so I'm sure. So I know that I speak about things outside of food as a dietitian. And sometimes people are like, how the hell are you talking about this as a dietitian? Because it's all so connected. And I have a personal belief that dieting has become a trauma response for individuals, particularly for women. Am I wrong to kind of think that way? Or is that like pretty like out there?
I want to know more about the what's underneath how your belief about that. So tell me more about the how it works.
Yes. So what I have found particularly, so I work with women that typically have dieted most of their life, and they've always been a little bit heavier, if you will, compared to, I'll say, the thin ideal that is typically put out there. And so they've always come from a space of I am not enough, or there is something wrong with me or my body because I can't meet that ideal that has been established. And so they have spent many years or decades dieting in an attempt to look the part, if you will. However, as you continue to engage in those patterns and don't get the result that you're looking for, it creates a conditioning of the body. It creates those sensations, those thoughts, those behaviors, those patterns. And as we go to, say, introduce a new diet, it actually ignites the nervous system and says, whoa, whoa, whoa. I've been down this place before. You've put me in restriction. You put me in deprivation. I've been so hungry before. You still don't feel good enough. I don't want to do this. And so the nervous system goes into that sympathetic response, the fight or flight, and it either completely shuts down or it gets enraged, like you said, and gets more angry. And so then we have that frustration, resentment. There's a lot of other emotions that come into the dieting space. And so until I can get a woman out of that trauma response, if you will, then there's this constant struggle and battle against food and also her body. And this has been something that's actually a little bit newer. I would say post COVID, this has become really prominent because we are using food in, we've always used food for purposes that it can't actually fix. But it seems to be more and more that we are going to food as a way to, cope, soothe, distract, numb, you name it. And at the same time, we were seeing the highest rates of dieting practices. So that's something that I'm still kind of flesh out because I'm not a therapist. I'm not trained in this. And as the more I speak with individuals such as yourself, the more apparent it becomes that when we're trying to put someone into a diet, they are literally, their nervous system is kicking back to us of saying, no go. I don't want to be put in this situation again. So here's my response to it. So
Mhm.
that's a little backstory of it.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant.
Does that
I
make
do.
sense? I don't
Yeah.
know. If I'm kind of just like I'm still working through the theory on this.
Yeah. No,
But
it's brilliant.
yeah.
Yeah. And I really resonate with it. I really resonate with it. Not this year, but last year for my birthday, I did a 30-day tapping series on my YouTube channel. And it was about trying to heal my body related to diet culture. And things about restriction, things about not wanting to go to the gym because I don't want to be the one that looks like a sausage in my in my workout clothes in the workout room, and all the things that prevent me from wanting to engage with diet culture again. So, no, I think that you are spot on when it comes to it being a trauma response. Our nervous system, and I was laughing to myself as you said the frustration and the anger, because the last major diet that I went through, like, I feel so much anger towards the leader of that diet program that I can't even see her face on YouTube anymore. And I'm just like, oh, that woman. No. And so I think you have it right in that there is a trauma response. I'm sure that woman is very nice. Just want to
Right.
say that up front.
Say the
But
emotion. Yeah.
yes, but for me, it was like, um, and so when I think about this, when I think about it in terms of what you've said and diet culture being a trauma response, I I think there are many, many women who may have experienced something similar, but all the way down to the time I was 5 and 6 years old, and I was not able to fit in regular clothing and had to get bigger sizes. I was already getting the message as a child that there was something wrong with me and that I wasn't enough because I wasn't wearing regular clothes. And so these messages go way, 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 way back for many of us about never meeting the standard that society has put in front of you to meet. And that is a trauma response. Then you have moments throughout your childhood where you're told things like, oh, you'd be so much prettier if you lost so and so pounds. Oh, you'd be so much prettier if you wore your hair this way. It would make your face look so much slimmer or whatever. So there's moments through time that stick with us. And there's a part of us, right? If we go into something like internal family systems, right? There's a part of us that wants to be loved genuinely for who we are, no matter what size we are. And there's a part of us that wants to be thin and beautiful like the girls on the magazines. And those two parts of us begin to have a war with each other inside of us. And who's going to win? The part that is the loudest, the part that says, no, I'm going to do what I want, that's the part that wins. And so you're right to say that when people start on any new diet or any new eating protocol, they are having a war inside of themselves. This part that wants to manage their behavior and this part that in internal family systems, they call a firefighter. And what do firefighters do? They come in and they put water over everything and it ruins everything, really, which is what can happen with dieting is we call it sabotaging ourselves. But what really it is these parts of us inside of ourselves that are saying, I don't want to be restricted. And the other part that says, well, if you want to be thin, you have to be restricted. And the war and the battle that goes on in our psyche because of that and our nervous system.
I think you just made sense of a lot of things that don't make sense for a lot of women because so many, like how I hear it, is that battle is so exhausting for them and they don't know why. And now it makes so much sense is because you do have two parts of you that are colliding and seeing which one can ultimately win. And so I'm assuming that part of the way that we integrate those two parts would be through that somatic work as well. Or is that what you would suggest? Or how can someone really work to quiet that inner battle?
Yes. So, of course, somatic work is what I love and what I do, and what I have seen to be the most transformational when it comes to integrating parts. We want to give a voice to the part that doesn't want to be restricted. We want to give a voice to that part. And a lot of times we don't. A lot of times, well, and I don't know about the women that you work with, but I know for myself, I've struggled with weight my whole entire life as well. And I cycle through periods of, oh, well, I've gotten too big. I need to restrict myself. And then having that fight that goes on in my head. And so this concept of learning how and why my nervous system responds in that way when I'm thinking about restricting myself and bringing that concept of self-compassion into it and saying, okay, yes, it sucks to be restricted this way, but you also don't feel good when you weigh more than you want to weigh. And having the conversation internally with yourself and saying, look, I get it. This really sucks. Like having to restrict ourselves, or maybe even having a conversation with yourself of maybe I don't need to restrict myself as much as I thought I needed to. Maybe I can make space or room for a bite here or of something that really brings me joy, but to really spend the time in savoring the joy that that bite brings me, not feeling like I have to eat the whole entire cake, just having a bite of cake because I want that moment of being able to savor the chocolate instead of condemning myself for not being good enough at restriction too, right? Giving myself the compassion to say, I'm allowed to find joy in life. And sometimes joy comes through food.
Mhm, absolutely. Hmm.
But I also want to recognize that if I am in a sympathetic response or I'm in a dorsal vagal collapse, that the way that I'm relating to food may simply be about soothing myself or nurturing myself or making myself feel less alone. And if I'm using food in that way to nurture or soothe or make myself feel less alone, and is it really about finding joy in the food? Or is it really being able to find a place of comfort for myself when I don't know where else to go for comfort?
Can we speak a little bit more to that in the collapse aspect? Because I think you described it as the feelings of hopelessness or helplessness. And then I kind of heard like where that victim mentality comes in, which I've never been able to find a word other than victim, because I think most of us know what that means or can feel like. But essentially, it is that hopelessness or helplessness. And a lot of people are feeling that way right now. How do we start to support and be kind with those emotions?
I think you're right in saying that there's a lot of us that are feeling a dorsal vagal collapse right now. We're feeling a sense of helplessness or hopelessness about our ability to make a change in multiple areas of the world right now, um, including sometimes ourselves and our body. And when we get to a point where we feel that kind of hopelessness or helplessness, um, what it means, I don't like to use the word victim. I agree that there needs to be a better word for it than that, because this, again, is your body's automatic response to a period of time that has been so stressful or so overwhelming that your body no longer has the energy to be able to put into the fight or flight anymore. And now your body has to collapse into this dorsal vagal response in order to reserve any energy that it has left. And so the collapse is there to protect you, to keep you safe, and to keep you alive in moments where you feel overwhelmed by the stress that's taking place. And so it is really an adaptive response, even though it feels like we might be in the middle of feeling victimized. It really is your body's way of continuing to protect you, just in another way.
Mm.
The way that we know from polyvagal theory to get out of a dorsal vagal collapse is that we have to begin to bring energy to that part of ourselves again. Because the way that polyvagal theory um, has been utilized and discussed is that they really talk about it as a ladder. Like the ventral vagal is the top of the ladder, the sympathetic is going down the ladder, and the dorsal vagal is at the bottom of the ladder. But the way that it works is that to be able to climb the ladder, you have to go through sympathetic response again. And so you have to be able to mobilize your body in some way in order to be able to get back up to ventral vagal response.
Mm-hmm.
And what that might look like for people is going for a walk. It might look like um, doing some yoga, gentle yoga. It might look like having a little dance on your own in your living room with the song that you absolutely love every time you hear it. One of the concepts within polyvagal theory as well is that initially when I first learned this theory, they really only talked about the three discrete areas of the nervous system. And as the years have progressed, Porges and others have talked about that there really can be blended states. And so as we move up and through sympathetic response, a blended state that we can go through in order to mobilize ourselves out of a dorsal vagal collapse would be something like play. Play is something that takes sympathetic energy, where our body is mobilized, and it combines it with ventral vagal energy as well. And so we're connecting with others generally in play. So going out for a game of pickleball or a pickup game of basketball or going and crafting with your friends. Anything that you feel like you can be connected with other people and you realize that you're not alone. Those are things that can pull you up and out of that dorsal vagal response as well. But finding something that really speaks to your soul and speaks to you as something that is engaging and fun and that you want to do, not something that you're having to do just because, right? And so if a walk is not your thing, if going for a bike ride is your thing, choosing the thing that makes you feel like a little less dorsal vagal energy, right? And it can be little stair steps that we make up the ladder of our nervous system's response.
Mm-hmm. I really enjoy how you say bring energy to it. But it's, I will say, this is the part where I really resonate when individuals say it feels hard. Because when you're feeling helpless or hopeless, it is hard to bring energy to that space. So,
Mm-hmm.
is there anything that you recommend in particular? Because what I heard you say is that you just gave us permission to have a lot more fun in our lives. And that's something that, for many reasons, fun or play has been taken out of our daily routines or even our weekly routines. So if you're feeling that way, it sounds like in order to bring that energy, it's finding those outlets that have no purpose, and I'm air quoting that, other than to bring fun and joy to your space
And connection.
and
Yeah.
connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I do agree that sometimes it's hard to get ourselves out of it. So some of the mobilizing things that you first have to do might be very quiet mobilizing things, like reaching out for a meditation, reaching out for music to play for yourself that generally will help your lift your spirit a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Not to go too woo-woo, but Esther and Jerry Hicks and Abraham Hicks are some folks that I've listened to for years, and they talk about that there is a the last time I saw the picture of it, it was a spiral of emotions. So it's like the very bottom of the spiral is despair, and the very top of the spiral is bliss. And sometimes you have to work your way through the spiral of all the different emotions to be able to get back up to the feeling of joy. But as you're able to do that, you might work through, despair up to anger or up to rage or up to ennui or whatever it is. I can't remember the scale right now.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to allow yourself to take little baby steps to be able to get to the point where you are then able to engage in something like play or playfulness. So it really speaks to that idea of bringing that self-compassion in again and being gentle with yourself when you are feeling like you're in dorsal vagal collapse. I have a technique that I often use with my clients called heart math, and I think we touched on it last
Yeah.
time.
Mhm.
But if you're in a dorsal vagal collapse, allowing yourself to spend 3 to 5 minutes in a heart math space where you're just breathing in and out for a count of 6, and you're just bringing breath. And then you're allowing yourself to visualize your heart space, and allowing yourself to visualize your heart expanding and then softening, and expanding and then softening. And then allowing yourself to just bring in something to mind, bring something to your mind's eye of something that you can appreciate. It doesn't even have to be something that you love or you felt really super great during, but just one thing that you can appreciate is enough to bring your body, both your heart and your brain, into coherence. And when we can bring ourselves into coherence with a slightly elevated emotion, oftentimes it's enough to bring a little bit more energy to that dorsal vagal collapse in order to be able to feel like we can access more energy to get back up into a sympathetic energy. Sorry, I'm talking with my hands a lot. I can see myself.
I'm such a fan. And I know exactly that spiral that you're referencing. It's really actually fascinating to look at it spiraling up and down and where some of those turn points are. Because, I mean, again, going back into just the awareness of who you are, you can potentially become aware of, hey, when I'm starting to feel this way, the next step could be I feel this way. And so that's where we can really put in those self-care measures to make sure that we're supporting you at your highest level. And it reminds me too, something that I personally do when I get into that space of, so that hopelessness, helplessness, victim, like that is a wave that comes over me personally, and it can feel very overwhelming. And something that I've learned is, one, creating that space just to be in an environment that is safe for myself, and then asking through breath work of, what do you need most in this moment? And I don't have to answer that question at first. And I keep repeating that. I'll repeat it like 10, 20, however many times. And it's interesting how things start coming to mind of what you need. And that could be, I mean, that's just something that I wanted to share with individuals tuning in. That could be a great place to start, at least, because we're starting to slow down, but also tune in. And then from there, you can take your next step in a little bit more gentle way.
I think I love that idea. And I also think if you're someone who loves to journal or someone who loves to write, creating a mind map is also really helpful. And so you can put inside the center of the mind map what things that make me feel safe, or things that bring me joy, or things that feel like play to me. And then you can start drawing spokes out from the center, and you start writing little things that bring you joy or bring you comfort. And so it can be simple things. So if it's something that brings me joy, soft blankets bring me joy. Cuddling and under a soft blanket with a cup of tea brings me joy. Listening to music that makes me want to sing along brings me joy. And you had said something very early, I think it was before we even started the podcast, and you had said that sometimes it's really hard to think about things that make me feel better. It's really hard to be able to identify those things. And I agree with that wholeheartedly, because I think as women, and especially as mothers and workers and wives and daughters, we have so many expectations on us, and we are constantly meeting other people's needs, that sometimes when we take on those other roles, we begin to forget about the things that have brought us joy over the years and over time. And so consciously making the effort to sit down and write down some of those things in a fun way, like in a little mind map. I remember doing those in the 6th grade, is a way to be able to just bring those small joys back to us. And just like with that scale of emotions that the Hickses talk about, you know, one little thing that can bring you joy, and adding that one little thing to your day is something that can over time begin to change the trajectory of where you're going in the future. An example of that would be about 5 years ago, maybe a little bit before the pandemic. I decided that I was going to read every day. It didn't matter how much I was going to read or what I was going to read. I was just going to put it on my schedule. Like, I'm going to read every day. And at one point, I was reading 3 or 4 books a week because I had put it on my schedule, and it was feeding my soul at the time. And now I'm sort of moving towards music, and I want to listen to music because music is feeding my soul. And so I'm pulling those things out of ways that I'm supporting my wellness, supporting my well-being. And I begin to build those into my day so that I know that there's going to be a moment where I'm going to have some enjoyment in what I'm going to be doing that day. And for me, that music feels like play. And so being able to identify those things for ourselves over time, and what looked like play to me in my 20s might not look to me what play looks like in my almost 50s, but I can begin to create a map for myself so that if I am struggling, I can pull that map out and be like, oh yeah, I forgot how much fun this is, or I forgot how much this brings me a feeling of being comforted or soothed in a moment that I'm struggling. Yeah.
What I love most about this is I truly think we're actually talking about self-care versus what self-care has been marketed to us. For example, like there's certainly things to get our hair done or our nails done or whatnot. And those are nice.
Mhm.
And they often still miss the mark of true self-care. And these are all things that you have shared with us that really don't cost anything, but they're an opportunity to bring that fun, that joy, that safety, that lightness, essentially, to really move you up in that emotional spiral to just feel better. And that's so important. And it is part of daily or weekly routines that is very much so necessary.
Yeah, I agree. I think and I agree that anytime you're looking about changing a behavior, whether it's your weight or a certain behavior that you have towards another type of substance or with in between a partner, that whenever you're trying to bring in change, it's really important that you also layer in self-care, ways that you are taking care of yourself, because it is really hard to change behavior.
Yeah.
Behavior often becomes our behavior because there's a certain amount of comfort in that behavior. There's a certain amount of familiarity in that behavior. But I was telling a client the other day, just because it's normal doesn't mean it's healthy. Just
Mhm.
because it feels normal doesn't mean it feels safe.
Mhm.
And what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring more safety, more health, and more wellness to our lives. And when we're doing that, when we're trying to make that change, self-compassion is a critical component of being able to do it successfully, because otherwise, it's so easy to drop down into that dorsal vagal collapse and be like, I'll never get there. I'll never be what, I dream of being,
Yeah.
because it's not happening fast enough, or it doesn't look exactly the way that we thought it would.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, Kim, I really could record like 2 hours with you. There's so many layers to this, per usual with being a human. There's so many nuances. And I really love that just the opportunity to be able to speak to those nuances, because it's not black or white. It's not all or nothing. It's not this way versus that way. There's so many layers to it. And for the individual to create what their layers look like, right? And just to be aware of that and compassionate to that. You just see the transformation happen when we can really get into that space. So I thank you for being willing to speak to that.
Absolutely. As you can tell, I love talking about this.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good thing. We want that. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I do, because it was so transformational for me. When I began to be able to put this in context and recognize that I have a unique nervous system. Yes, it's structured like everyone else's, but it also has all the layers of my life and my experiences and my temperament and the fact that I'm an empath and all these other things. And that is important for me to understand and for me to be able to bring compassion to myself. And if I can show up as a compassionate coach or therapist, then I can hold space for the people that I am bringing into my office or bringing into my virtual Zoom room in a different way.
Mhm.
I can show up differently when I show compassion to myself. I'm able to show up more compassionately for others, which ultimately is why we're here. We're here to connect with each other and to bring more light to the world through our compassion.
I love that. Well, thank you again so much for your time and expertise and sharing. I know that there are going to be individuals that really resonate with this angle that you are sharing, and hopefully it will give them the permission to lean into some of those things that they need in the form of understanding, awareness, compassion, you name it. So thank you again, Kim.
Yes, thank you.